I have miles and miles ahead of me, tales to listen to, time to spend. Up ahead, the road is bending. Wonder what's around the bend.
Hello, I'm Charles Kuralt. We're off again to meet a few people on the back roads of America. These are people you know, not from the front pages. They've never been on the front pages. They're people you know from next door and down the block. Their stories are some of my favorites from 25 years on the road. Our tour this time is a kind of sampler. A surprise, for instance, in Jonesboro in the state of Tennessee. The surprise is that the state of Tennessee very nearly entered the Union as the state of Franklin. Would have, but for a hothead named Andrew Jackson. Do you worry about what the modern age is doing to modern kids? You may worry a little less when you meet these kids in Tiburon, California. With every blandishment of our time before them, all they want to do is swing from a tree. We thought we'd put something apple-flavored in our sampler, and we found just what we wanted in central Ohio. We will follow in the footsteps of Johnny Appleseed, who left orchards and a legend behind him. We will put a tradition to the test in Waynesburg, Pennsylvania. Folks around here swear that it has rained in Waynesburg every 29th of July for more than 100 years. Come see if it does. Before any of that, though, our sampler will take us to Alaska to see the past carved in wood. The tour ships tie up at Ketchikan, and all the folks from California and Iowa and Illinois hurry down the gangplank and head straight for the totem poles. That's what they came to see in this part of Alaska, and they are everywhere to be seen. Few of these totem poles are old or original. Most of them are copies, sometimes pretty poor copies, of masterpieces that used to stand in Indian villages on the distant islands of this part of Alaska. If you want to see the masterpieces, you have to go for a walk in the woods. But if you care anything about the past or about craftsmanship, it's a walk that'll break your heart. These are the old totem poles, lying where they fell or were discarded. Once, this was the upright symbol of a proud family. Now it's a fragment of rotting wood, forgotten. Almost forgotten. Her name is Jane Wallen. She's the 27-year-old director of the Alaska State Museum. His name is Dennis Demmert. He's a Tlingit Indian, the president of the Ketchikan camp of the Alaska Native Brotherhood. Without enough money or enough help, they've decided to save what's left of Alaska's last totem poles. What's left is pitifully little, but artistically overwhelming. In the ruins of remote island villages with names like Tongass and Klinkwan and Old Kasan, magnificent carved faces still stare out to sea. The work that great artisans once did with adzes and chisels and crabapple mallets has been modified by rain and fungus and carpenter ants. But enough remains to bear witness to a golden age of totem pole carving in the last century that the tourists, and indeed most Alaskans, never suspected. Not many people, not even many Indian people, remember the old totem poles. We met one man who does, Walter Young, and we went with him to Old Kasan, a place he moved away from in 1900. When you were a boy in this village, did the totem poles have great importance to the people? Were they proud of them? And
well, it was an important thing to them, yeah. It seems to me like it represents a record of that family.
A record of the family?
Yeah, like a family tree or something like that.
Jane Wallen and Dennis Demmert hope to move these poles, just as they are, to safety at a new Indian Cultural Center in Ketchikan. And they hope to do it this summer, since for many of the poles, even a year or two would be too long to wait.
There are people that say, wait a little longer, but we know that we don't have many years left. There's one pole that we looked at yesterday that was standing last year and is down this year. And I think that we can probably record more loss. They just aren't going to last.
So you're going to save them?
We hope that we are. We're going to try.
We're glad we saw these awesome carvings where they were put in place on these islands, rising from the moss and fern and buckbrush. Let them go now. This is the summer of their removal, so that in future summers, the young Indian descendants of the men who carved them can see where they came from, and so that the tourists can have a truer idea of the greatness that was here, long before their ship pulled in. Tomorrow it's going to rain. In Waynesburg, that's not just a casual observation. That's an article of faith. Tomorrow is July 29th, rain day. It always rains in Waynesburg on July the 29th. But CBS News does not accept stories like this at face value, of course, so we gave newspaperman John O'Hara the Mike Wallace treatment right there on the Greene County Courthouse steps. You're kind of a town historian. Did it rain last year on July 29th?
Oh, yeah, it's a good rain.
What about the year before?
The year before, even a little harder that other year.
The year before that?
Yes, it was a fair one the year before that.
But it rained.
But it did rain, oh, indeed, yeah.
Journalists never lie, as you know. Neither, of course, do lawyers. So we sought out retired attorney Albert Allison Sayers.
It always rains on the 29th.
And why, we asked, July the 29th?
Back in the, I should say in the 70s, 1870s, long in there, some farmer repeatedly made the comment to one of my ancestors, collaterals, that it always rained on his birthday, and his birthday was on July the 29th.
This remark was made down at the drugstore, which had, and still has, hangers on with nothing else to talk about but the weather. Old Albert Allison kept the records in the margin of the drugstore ledger, and as sure as July 29th came, there came a shower. In this century, the drugstore passed to a Mr. Daly, who took to making bets with city slicker traveling salesmen. "I'll bet you your hat it'll rain July 29th, he'd say, and thus amassed a vast collection of hats.
And after Daly died, his son, who's a retired lawyer in town, then kept the records.
Which accounts for the strange sight of a grown man standing out in the bright sun, holding an umbrella and scanning the sky. He must. This is Squire Daly, the rain prophet. This notion that it rains on the 29th goes way back.
Oh, yes. I can remember when I was a boy. I think it was before I even started to school. I used to loaf around the drugstore a lot, of course, and there were a lot of hangers on there that would loaf around there. And on this particular night, they would get a case of beer and would go down in back of the drugstore and sit there and drink beer all night and watch for the rain.
The rain watch starts in Waynesburg again at midnight tonight. In the meantime, people are hanging out their laundry and washing their pickup trucks, which always brings on the rain, as we know. Waynesburg hopes for rain on the 29th, welcomes it, and expects it. I'll stick around and let you know tomorrow whether it rained or not. It may not, but I'm not making any bets at the drugstore. It always rains in Waynesburg on July the 29th, and it did again today.
It rained this morning, certainly, twice. 1:09 and about 6:30. I came out of the restaurant about 6:30.
There was evidence enough to satisfy the skeptical. A car was seen with raindrops on its fender. And Waynesburg's official prophet of rain, Squire John Daly, made this announcement.
And we had a slight sprinkle, which was enough to make our tradition stand up.
There wasn't much rain, but the tradition is that it always rains on this day. The tradition doesn't say it has to rain hard. Waynesburg's town historian, John O'Hara.
It sets the town apart. It gives it a separate identity that it wouldn't have otherwise.
The tradition is secure for the 105th year, and all the city slickers who came to town to bet their hats that it wouldn't rain have gone home hatless. His name was John Chapman. He wandered through this part of central Ohio 160 years ago. And driving today along country roads that were only Indian trails back then, you can still see the legacy of Johnny Appleseed. In this season, in this country that he knew as wilderness, the apple trees are thickly planted, and every tree thick with fruit. We got to wondering what manner of man he truly was. So we dropped by Westerville, Ohio, to inquire of his biographer, Dr. Robert Price of Otterbein College. I, for some reason, always thought of Johnny Appleseed as a generous man, giving away apple seeds and all that. Was he, in fact, a generous man, or was he purely a businessman?
Well, I don't think he was a pocket-bound Yankee peddler. I don't think he was that kind of Yankee peddler at all. Apparently, there was a great streak of generosity in him, and we're told that he did give away his trees on occasion, but his business was to sell them.
Whatever John Chapman was like, Johnny Appleseed, as Professor Price once wrote, belongs to the American trails and rivers forever. You will find him in the Ohio autumn, out here in the orchards of the Tuller Fruit Farm at Dublin, Ohio, sharing in the harvest. He lives in the accents of Charles Tuller, reciting the names of his apples.
Right here in the orchard, we have the Lodi, the Melba, the Jonathan, the Cortland, the Wealthy, the Red Delicious, the Golden Delicious, the Stamen Wine Sap, the Rome Beauty, and the Ruby, ripening this fall.
And in the sales talk of Charles Tuller's wife.
These are Red Delicious, Jonathan, Golden Delicious, and Cortland. They're all all-purpose apples except the Red Delicious, and they're strictly an eating apple.
Here are Jonathan, Bellflower, Northern Spy, apples for baking, apples for pie, Rhode Island Greening, Maiden Blush, Winesap, Pippin, Macintosh. It's an old poem by Mary Legler about Johnny Appleseed. He lives in the packing shed of Joe Papania and his brothers and their children at New Waterford, Ohio. Russet, Ben Davis, Grimes, Yellow Gold, Rambo, and Baldwin to store in the cold. Apples are gathered in orchards today, for Johnny Appleseed came this way. Adults are fond of saying that childhood isn't what it used to be. Well, I don't know. We have come across a place where nothing much seems to have changed. The kids around here call it the tree swing. There was one where you grew up, remember? This one is in Tiburon, California, across the bay from San Francisco, and a place where you'd expect the kids to be awfully sophisticated about sex and drugs and cars, the things parents worry about. After watching for a while, we thought the parents of Tiburon have more to fear from broken arms. All the tree swing is a rope tied to a eucalyptus limb. A boy named Mike, we discovered, shinnied out there and tied it. That's Mike. He is a folk hero in some circles around here.
Somebody, hurry up!
After school and on weekends, the tree swing has become a meeting place. And what goes on here is exactly what always went on at such places. For one thing, dares are sought and accepted. Do you dare me? I dare you.
You dare me? I dare you. The next one.
No.
No, that I don't.
You'll kill her.
I did it!
For another thing, boys show off for girls, and girls show off for boys. We would not wish to make too much of it. Kids may be all different today, but under this tree, there's no evidence of it. We found the tree swing to be a compelling place, touched by the unchanging grace of youth, and by youthful innocence and laughter. 12 miles from here is Berkeley, where there have been all those angry demonstrations in our times. 10 miles from this tree is the Haight-Ashbury, where heroin can still be purchased on the street, and is. Since you know all about those dark and troubled parts of our national life, we thought you might like to know about the tree swing, too. There's a fire burning in the fireplace up at the Parsons Table restaurant on the hill, and E.C. Miller, Chuck Gordon, and Susan Taylor are just striking up an old anthem of East Tennessee. And Jonesboro, Tennessee's oldest town, stands quietly below in the late autumn sun. It's all so peaceful now. Hard to believe that this was once the most contentious little town in North America. That was just at the end of the Revolutionary War, when North Carolina, which had ambitions to be a civilized place, took one look at its western possessions, filling up with rough characters wearing buckskins and fighting Indians, and decided enough was enough. So the state of North Carolina said to the brand new American Congress, "Tell you what we're going to do. We're going to give North Carolina west of the mountains to you." The brand new American Congress said, "Thanks just the same, but we've got troubles enough already, and what we don't need is a bunch of backwoodsmen living in a wilderness." People around here, left with no government, decided they better start one. And right here on this spot, they did. As far as they were concerned, it was the 14th state. They named it for Ben Franklin. The state of Franklin convened itself in the courthouse, right here where today's courthouse sits, and elected Colonel John Sevier as governor. Sevier's state should have been a success, and it would have been if Sevier's constituents hadn't turned out to be the most headstrong, unruly, rough and tumble, ungovernable lot who ever tried to form a government. They fell out into factions and threw one another bodily out of the courthouse. They appointed competing sheriffs to arrest one another. They sent one another to the old graveyard above town with muskets and pistols. And it didn't help a bit when a blustery young lawyer came riding into town spoiling for a fight. Ambitious troublemaker named Andy Jackson. Jackson, who lived here, to Colonel Robert Love, "You, sir, and all your family are a band of land pirates." Colonel Robert Love to Jackson, "And you, sir, are a damned long, gangling, sorrel-topped soap stick." Colonel John Sevier, "Andrew Jackson is the most abandoned rascal my eyes have ever beheld." Jackson in a newspaper ad, "Know ye that I, Andrew Jackson, do pronounce, publish, and declare to the world that His Excellence John Sevier is a base coward and poltroon." They fought it out on the street with sword and cane. With others, during and after the days of the state of Franklin, both Sevier and Jackson fought it out with guns. Then there was the time down here at the Chester Inn, but let Paul Fink, the Jonesboro historian, tell you about that.
Well, Jackson came here to hold court, and he was just so ill that they had to be helped off his horse and put to bed over there in the Chester Inn, now still standing. And when a lot of Sevier's friends heard that he was here, they gathered around on the outside, and there was a lot of talk going on. They'd bring the old man out, not the old man, but bring Jackson out and tar and feather him. Well, some of Jackson's friends heard that, and they went to him and said, "We can sneak you out the back door. They're going to come in here and get you." Well, Jackson was never a man to run from anything. He said, "Nope, I won't do that." He said, "Bring me my pistols, load them, and lay them on the bed." They were laid there, and they sent the message out to the mob. Said, "I'm ready to receive you at any time you wish to wait upon me, and I only trust that your leader will lead his men rather than follow them." Well, there wasn't any tar and feather. I guess nobody was a candidate for the honor. So things quieted down then. Not exactly the nice, quiet individuals we had here at that time.
Those nice, quiet individuals finally cleared out of Jonesboro. The state of Franklin failed of admission to the Union by one vote in the Congress. John Sevier left town to become 6 times governor of its successor, the state of Tennessee. Andy Jackson left town to become war hero and president. Half the people in Jonesboro claim relation to one or the other of them. But let me tell you something. Jonesboro's been a lot quieter town since they left. Well, time to say goodbye until our next trip together. We've heard about a story up the road here, but we kind of hope we never get there. With luck, we'll stumble upon something more interesting along the way. I can see the road is bending. Wonder what's around the bend.
All these years I've been a-wondering, just when I think I'm near the end, I always see the road is bending, and I wonder what's around the bend.